All right, welcome everybody. This is the Zoom review session for environmental science, BIO110, Unit 3. So we'll be taking our exam on Wednesday, and I'm just going to go through the questions you guys put in the discussion board, and we'll talk through those as we go. All right, so share my screen with you. All right, so we can see the discussion board here. I'm just going to start at the top and work our way down. So Brendan is wondering about why is there still such bad air quality? So you would think that if it's very bad, we'd stop polluting it, but why haven't we? And that's a really good question, honestly. If we know that air pollution is caused by the things that people are doing, why have we not stopped? And long story short is there's kind of a number of different sociological factors at play. Um, so I'll share this EPA link about current and future challenges. Um, so we can talk about common pollutants like particle pollution and ground level ozone. You should know about ozone, and it's good when it's up high in the atmosphere, but when it's being formed down low as a secondary pollutant, it's bad. Um, where it's down where we can breathe it. There's also things like sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide. These are byproducts of fossil fuel combustion. So like running our vehicle engines or coal-powered fire plants, electric plants, things like that. There's also lead, carbon monoxide. So why haven't we done it? Well, we've done a lot to improve air quality over the years. I was hoping this would have a good change here. All right. So climate change is a big part of that. These greenhouse gases are long-lived molecules, so they'll persist up in the atmosphere for quite a while, without naturally breaking down. I have some crazy hair going on tonight. Um, so climate change and increasing temperatures globally will play a role in that. This breaks down what the EPA is doing. So, the National Highway and Traffic Safety Administration have set greenhouse gas emission standards. So we're trying to limit what we're putting up. Um, Gosh, I feel like this article falls a little short. So some of the bigger like sociological factors that are happening are um, we don't really have a scalable alternative as far as transportation goes, right? So our American towns are kind of built around cars. You have to have a car unless you live in a well-designed city. You have to have a car to be able to get groceries back to your house. You have to have a car to get to work or to school. You have to have a car to get your pet to the vet's office, like all of the daily life kinds of things. For most Americans, we need to have a car to be able to function. There are some cities that have done a really good job of putting together public transit in such a way that it's easy, it's accessible, it's affordable, and it's also socially acceptable. Um, so that's something that the US struggles with. Europe has done a way better job. Um, you know, Europe was kind of populated and developed before cars, right? So their their societies were put together in a different way. Okay, so not having a good alternative to fossil fuel burning cars is one of our major challenges. Also, for energy production in the US, we don't really have a great alternative yet. Not something like we're not ready to replace fossil fuel burning um, energy production facilities like a coal burning power plant. We can't phase them all out yet because we don't have enough renewable energy or nuclear energy facilities in place to meet the demand that we have for electricity. And demand is going up, not down. for electrical energy. So we need to kind of invest in those two major areas. Um, and then the third part, I think, like we don't have these practicable alternatives yet. And one of the reasons we don't is because we don't have a strong demand for those services yet from the people. So like why would companies or utilities invest in these types of things if there's not a strong demand for that product, right? So we need to have the will of the people to want that change to happen. Um, so those are kind of the hitch points there. That's a really good question, Brendan. Okay, let's go on. Next question. Evan's wondering how much of our water is polluted and what are the best ways to help an ecosystem in the water? Brendan was wondering that as well. And yes, I think you're right. You would need to do a lot of research and probably narrow the focus down a little bit more to really get into why that's an issue. But I did a search for just in Michigan how much of our water's polluted, and the first hits that came up were about PFAS, so those polyfluorinated carbon-based molecules, the forever chemicals. So it kind of depends on what kind of pollution or contamination you're concerned with. But I think you're right to be concerned. Uh, yeah, and kind of we don't really know yet either. So this is a number I've seen other places too. Uh, a large number of Michiganders get their drinking water from private wells. So my family, we live out like on a farm. There's not city water for us to hook up to. There's not city sewer. There's no natural gas lines out where we live. So we get our water from a well that's drilled down, and we just had it replaced 5 years ago. So I know the well is about 60 feet deep, which is pretty shallow for a well. Um, and so when you drill a well, right, you basically force a pipe down until you hit water. Um, and when you hit water, what we're really tapping into is something called an aquifer, which is like an underground lake. So you can kind of picture like a big, kind of porous, open space in the rock, like bedrock, um, which is full of water. So like an underground lake. And so the well that my house uses to pump water from that aquifer up into our home is kind of like a giant straw, right? Just slurping that water up and out. Um, we did bacteriological testing when we first bought our house and moved in to make sure that there wasn't any like contamination from septic systems or manure being applied to the farm fields around us, making it into that aquifer. We also did testing for nitrates, which can be an indicator of agricultural kind of like runoff, making it into your water source. Um, but other than that, we haven't done any other water testing, and I don't think most people have. So we don't really know of those 1.25 million people in Michigan who are getting their drinking water from a well like mine. We don't know how much of that water is contaminated with PFAS, or really probably anything. We don't have much data. So it is a big issue that needs to be addressed. Okay. There was another question. I think Ava was asking about aquifers. What does it mean when the water table falls? And why is it a bad thing when it falls? So the water table is kind of like how saturated the ground is with water. And that part of that also falls in with aquifers as well. So I mentioned my well is like a straw slurping water up out of that underground lake, the aquifer. But my house isn't the only house pulling water out of that aquifer, right? Probably a lot of our neighbors and other people in our community are drawing water out of that same aquifer. And the more of us that pull water from that aquifer, the lower the water level drops in the aquifer, right? And it can happen where so much water is pumped out of an aquifer that it runs dry. And we see that out west, especially where there's agriculture in areas that don't get a ton of rainfall. They're pulling water out from their aquifers faster than it can be replaced by precipitation. And so those are that's one of the problems there is that wells can run dry. So then what do the families that depend on those aquifers for their drinking water do, right? So that's a problem for residential water use. And of course, it also impacts agriculture and industry too. Okay, good. I think I got those. Cole was wondering about natural disasters and how does that change the work an environmental scientist would do in the field? There's actually, where'd it go? Here we go. Uh, like that's a field you can specialize in, environmental disaster jobs. So environmental disasters or natural disasters like forest fires or hurricanes, yeah, even droughts, tornadoes. So it's a whole field that you could go into and kind of specialize in, what are the common challenges that a community in an area would face after certain types of natural disasters, and how can you participate in that? You could be a wildland firefighter. I have a buddy who works as a wildland firefighter for the Forest Service, and in the summertime, he hops on planes and he'll go out and work fire lines all over the place. He says it's a great way to see a lot of beautiful country. Okay, I'll share all these links with you all, by the way. Lacey was wondering about leachate liners. So, under the newer style of landfill, they're supposed to kind of collect any water, right? So, like it rains on a landfill, that water will filter through all the trash in the landfill, and then it reaches the liner at the bottom where it's collected. And we call that garbage juice, as Lacey calls it. It's called leachate. And so, what happens to the leachate after that? So it gets treated first, and it gets treated a few different ways. There's some chemical reactions they can do to that water to remove certain types of contaminants. There's also certain like bacteriological treatments we can do. So if we expose that leachate water to certain bacterial communities, they can help break things down further. And usually, as things get broken down, they become less and less dangerous or toxic. So we basically the thought is that we'll treat the water to the point where it's safe to release, like discharge into the environment. So usually it gets put into a local waterway after it's been treated. Um, so I found this resource, Lacey, on the EPA's website with the like the system that like basically if a landfill is collecting leachate, treating it. After it's treated, it's called effluent. And then they want to release that into a water source. This is the regulatory system they'd have to work through. So they need a permit to address any pollution that could be happening. And there's different kinds of examples here. So I don't really see something here that talks about leachate. I wonder if that might be municipal wastewater. I don't know. But this is the program that would regulate what is being released and where it's being released. Okay. Other questions. Brianna was wondering how much detail or how in depth do we need to know about the different agencies involved with waste management, like RCRA and CERCLA? And that's a really good question. I don't expect you to know the history of those two or any of them. But I do expect you to know, like, kind of some major bullet points. So you should know that RCRA is for Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. So you should know what it stands for, right? And you should know, like, basically what it does. So RCRA is kind of responsible for governing the disposal of solid waste, like garbage, and hazardous waste. CERCLA, on the other hand, is our Superfund program. So CERCLA stands for the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act, commonly known as the Superfund program. This law um, creates a tax on chemical and petroleum industries, and they use that money to clean up kind of like the worst spills and contamination that the companies that produce that waste can't take care of. So, like a company that created pollution in a certain location 50 years ago, but has been out of business for 20 years, the Superfund, that money from the tax on chemical and petroleum industries, that money is used to clean up those waste sites. And you can actually see the list of what are the priority sites to be cleaned up. And this program has actually been really successful. They've like through this program, they've gotten to almost all of the original Superfund sites now. And got them remediated and cleaned up, and it's been a really successful program. Does that help answer what you were wondering about, Bree? Good. All right. Nick was wondering about changing trends in waste production. So, why is it that people started producing more waste after 1960? And what changed in the 1990s that slowed down that acceleration in basically like per person garbage production? Um, Cole is right that there were a lot of regulations and laws passed, especially in the late 80s and 90s, that were very influential in curbing waste production um, through several facets. So there, like in the 90s and late 80s, there was a push for like the amount of packaging to be reduced. There's a push for things to be recyclable. So recycling programs became more common and more successful in that time period as well. Um, yeah, and so a combination of regulatory changes and recycling programs were really effective. I had a link I wanted to share. Here we go. So this is just like trends in solid waste for the US in the 90s. But this kind of breaks it down. So recycling and composting picked up. And landfilling and combustion. So some like if you remember Becky, our guest speaker, said that in Austria they don't have landfills, right? So all of their solid waste gets burned, and basically the energy from burning all that trash is really effective way for them to produce electricity. But of course you have to also deal with like the gases that are released from that. So there's pros and cons, but it works for them. Okay, good. I think the reason that trash production picked up in the 60s to begin with was there was a general increase in wealth at that time. So Americans had more spending power. Like the average American household had more extra income to spend on stuff. And so when we're purchasing more things, um, when we have more trash, right? So we kind of shifted to more of a consumerism mentality in the 60s. Okay. Ava's question. So I think that brings us here to Emily. Uh, Emily suggests reviewing the quiz questions. That's a great idea, Emily. There's only so many ways my brain can think of to ask you the same questions, right? Ask you about the same content. Um, Something she's confused about is the air quality chapter, but she plans to focus her time on that one. So that is a good tip to think about. The quizzes are really good study tools. And also, if you can kind of figure out like of all the things on the exam, like which chapter or which areas do you feel the least confident, and then spend your time focusing on those rather than trying to just start at the beginning of the unit and read through all your notes or all the things that we did over, the last, what, 5 weeks. That's a lot to cram into a week of studying. Okay, do you guys have any other questions or things you want to chat about?
I have one. So is this like the final kind of technically like the last, we don't have a final exam, it's just going to be this test?
Right. Yep. So it's not cumulative, although I expect that you still know the things that we learned in the first two-thirds of the course, but I'm testing you over your knowledge of the Unit 3 stuff.
Okay. And then do you know what chapters that is exactly? Is it
Let
chapter
me
most?
look. Here we go. So Unit 3. So it's chapters, what is that, 15 through 20.
Okay, thank you.
Hmm. Awesome. Anything else you want to chat about?
Mhm. I think. Is that the only thing we have to do?
Yeah, I've got like a super short survey about how you feel about science that we'll do for the first 10 minutes when we get there. But other than that, you'll just take the test and I'll give you a high five on your way out the door.
And then there was just the extra credit for was it the spotlight?
Yes, if you submit your scientist spotlight to the scientist spotlight initiative to be published, I will give you extra credit.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's everything. And then do you know for like the optional smart book activities, does that like if you do it, do you get like more points or just like optional like there for you to use, but you don't have to?
Yeah, it's there for you to use, but you don't have to do it. I figure since you guys pay
Okay.
for them and some students do like them, I'd link them so that they're there for you, but you don't have to do it.
And then okay, I guess just one more thing. Um I still haven't finished my soil and ocean acidification lab. I don't know if you would still take that like for partial credit.
Yep, I'll take anything from Unit 3 until you start working on the exam. So you can give it to me at the beginning of class if you want, Brianna.
Okay.
And actually, I told people to hang on to those and not give them to me until
Okay.
class this week so you wouldn't lose any points for late work.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what else I have, but yeah, perfect. I'll have enough time to prepare.
Awesome. All right. Well, I will see you on Wednesday then.
All right, nice to talk to you.
Yeah, you too.
See you Wednesday.
See ya.